Hello everybody! Do you know I haven't done a video on a Mk3 Mondeo for quite a while now, so today's the day. It's not going to be much of a video, by the way. It's a boring subject and it's probably been done a million times before, but I'm going to do my little version of it. I think it's what you call the positive crankcase ventilation breather hose. Flipping heck, that's a mouthful. But anyway, it's a pain in the arse. It's that stupid little breather hose that's buried behind the inlet manifold. And yeah, it's a right flipping pain to get to. You can't take the starter motor out because you can only get to the bottom of it. So you really need to pull the inlet manifold forward to sort of like get to it properly. And even when you pull the manifold forward, it's still bloody tight down there. But anyway, what I decided to do, because I've got to do this job, I've actually got to do it on a car. And I'll tell you what happens is, I should have said this to start with, when these breather hoses have got a split in them, you start the car up and they rev like over 2,000, 3,000 RPM sometimes, and the revs will stick up. They'll eventually come down a bit, but they'll still stay way higher than they should be. And this car being an automatic, it's pretty dicey putting it into gear, so it definitely needs to be done. And also, apart from that, when they're split, you can hear the air being sucked into the hoses, or into the hose, should I say. So I'm going to replace this hose. I'll give you the part number for the new hose as well, and I'm going to show you how best I change them, because I've got a few little tricks to sort of like make life a bit easier. So anyway, and also, last thing, I'm going to show you a bit on the car, and I also have a spare engine over there, which I changed last week because one of the con rods, I think the little end's gone, and it was about to pop through the side of the engine block and say hello, but we caught it in time. So I've got an inlet manifold on the engine over there, which I can show you a bit better and a bit more clearly, rather than trying to get the camera down the bloody hell in there because there's no room. So anyway, I'm going to get on, let's get going. So anyway, if you're familiar with these Mk3 Mondeos, you will know that there's two little clips you just turn round, and then you can pull that front grille out of the way. There you go. And also the headlights, they're held in by two little clips. You just pull them up. They might be rusted in, I don't know. Then disconnect your plug connectors and pull your headlights right out of the way. The front end of your car should look something like this now. But here's what I'm going to say before we actually get onto our engine. Down either side behind the headlights, there'll be like 3 10mm bolts holding this whole plastic panel on. If you undo them 3 bolts either side, then pull this whole panel forward like that, so you're making a bigger gap between the radiator and the inlet manifold. I'm going to take the fan assembly off. When you do that, it makes it so much easier to actually get in there and undo the bolts. It gives you so much more room. If I had 3 hands, this would be easier, but I need 1 hand to hold the phone. But if you pull this panel forward now, you can then get hold of your radiator fan unit and pull it up and out. There's a couple wires that you should disconnect, one for your motor and one for your resistor, so get them off first. But like I say, when that front end is unbolted and you can pull it forward, you can get this fan unit out so much easier, and it gives you a lot more room to work on down there, so you can actually get your socket and extension into the bolts that hold the manifold on. And next up, unclip this hose that goes onto your throttle housing. There's another breather hose that goes on the back of the engine. Disconnect that, then you can pull your whole air cleaner box out, because that's going to need to come out so we can unclip the wiring on the vehicle. To make things as simple as possible, you may not have to do this, but I do it anyway, so everything's a lot easier. All the wiring that comes off your main wiring loom and comes around to your EGR, ignition coil, and all the wiring down the back here, I disconnect so I can pull all that wiring out, if I can get to it. And then you've got all that little loom here, which obviously goes down the back there. So you can kind of swing it. You disconnect your injectors. There's a 10mm that holds your wiring loom onto the rocker cover. But and there's a load of clips that hold the loom onto the actual inlet manifold as well. But if you get it all unclipped and undo all the block connectors that are in the way, that are holding things on, then you can pull the whole wiring loom like clear of the manifold. You haven't got to take it all off, obviously. You can leave it on where it goes around to the ECU, but you can see I can pull the whole wiring loom back now, so when I move the inlet manifold it's not going to strain any of the wires. So from this point on we'll deal with this engine on the bench, it's just easier to show. But any wiring that you've got, like on your map sensor, this little solenoid valve, and there's some more wiring on the left hand side of the dipstick, you haven't got to touch any of that wiring, just leave it alone, unless you were going to remove the manifold altogether, then you do need to disconnect it all. There'll be a little 8mm headed bolt that holds your dipstick tube to the inlet manifold. You need to take that off because the dipstick gets in the way of one of the bolts you need to undo, but don't take the dipstick out. Once you've unbolted it, just move it across to one side. You'll probably have to go underneath the car to start with, because there's a 10mm bolt right at the bottom of the manifold. Ah, flipping heck, that's bloody tight. So, and the dipstick tube gets in the way of that as well, so having like a wobbly extension bar could help. All in all, there are 7 10mm headed bolts, I've actually already loosened this one, that hold this manifold on at the top half. There's like 3 of these 10mm that are all around this intake side where your throttle flap is. There's 1 at the top and there's 2 at the bottom, and then the rest of them are all along here. But it's pretty easy to know where all the bolts are that are holding it, but it's pretty easy to know where all the bolts are, because you see these holes like here, here and through here, that's where they are. So you just feed your socket through there. The only problem is there's a high chance, God almighty that was tight, once you've actually undone the bolt, if you don't have a magnetic 10mm socket, you may drop the bolt down. So I've got a trick for getting them back on, but getting them out can be a bit dicey there. Anyway, last one, which is like right up against your flipping, underneath your power steering reservoir almost. It also helps because you've got your headlamp removed, you can get your hand through where the headlight would be to get your socket through there. So it all makes sense. Hello! Anyway, we're all off now, and that's that. Oh, flipping heck. You've got to be careful because it's a bit stuck, like the rubber gaskets are stuck to the head. Because this manifold's got no wiring on it, it's going to come straight off. But I'll show you something in a minute. In actual fact, I'm going to pull this right off in a minute, but this hose is actually okay. There's our breather hose. This one's actually okay, but you'll notice there's a coolant hose running here as well. So you've got to have this breather hose running underneath the coolant hose. So when you imagine sort of like what it looks like now, so when you put the new hose back on, it's sitting in the same position. Now what you're best doing, because it's still pretty tight down there, if you've got a pair of long nose pliers, you can get them on the clip. That's if the hose does have a clip, because a lot of people fit these hoses back on new ones and they don't put a clip on it. And you can, like, that is pretty well stuck. So I would try and, I think it's a case of the clip is actually stuck to the hose, so I can't sort of like get it moving, but you'd probably have to sort of like hold the clip like that, undone, and then try and pull the hose, because it ain't coming free from the bloody, it's actually stuck to the hose. And I think when you get a brand new one of these hoses, you'll find that the clip is actually glued to the hose. And I broke it free now, so that's that out of the way. It's never easy, but then you might have to get a screwdriver or something to actually prise that, because it could be a bit tight on there. It's coming. Oh my God! Off you come. That's it. We're off. I'm going to take this manifold right off because I'm going to show you a few things on it. First of all, just like I've taken the manifold off, if you wanted to do that and take it right off, there's 2 connectors down here. One connector on your thermostat, and there's another connector for your knock sensor. They're a bit tricky to get to, but you can get them through the headlight again, where the headlight would sit, and get your hand through there, and you can flick the connectors off. Once them wires are off, you can then pull them wires out the way that are on the car, and then you'll be able to sort of like lift your manifold straight out again, just like I've done. There's your crankcase vent. But I can tell you now, all this great big bloody plastic unit, there's absolutely nothing inside it, and I'll show you. Right, this is number 8 on 8mm screws that are holding it in, and chances are this is actually stuck on as well with a gasket. So I'm going to give it a bit of a prod. Yeah, that's all. There we go. There you go, there's absolutely nothing inside it, just a great big empty casing. But what you do have, see your little valve here, if I can shake it, you can hear like a little ball, that's your little valve. That's all it is. So, but yeah, these very rarely go wrong. In actual fact, I can't even remember a case of one of these have actually gone wrong. Now, I'm probably going back to the days of the Ford Sierra when I used to have to change these things. But yeah, there's 10 times more chance of the flipping hose splitting that comes off this than actually this playing up. So yeah, it's pretty empty in there as well. But if you wanted to take this off to check it anyway, but believe me, I've never ever had one of these gunged up with anything. If you're just changing this hose on the car, you see your actual rubber manifold gaskets here. If they're still protruding from the edge of this actual manifold and they're not completely flattened, you can reuse them. 9 times out of 10 I'll just bang the manifold back on and bolt it back up and they're perfectly fine. But if they're totally flattened or you really want to change them, then go ahead. They're just a bit tricky to change when they're in the car, but you can do it. So I'm going to try and get this, yeah, this clip is stuck to the hose as well, but yep, it's coming off. There. There is the part number to the new hose. And you see with these new hoses, the actual spring clip, it's got a little red retainer on it holding the clip open. So it makes it easy to actually fit this hose. What I would do and what I would say is get some silicone spray and just spray it in there a little bit. It will make it easier to go on, because these new hoses are a little bit tough to go on, and then you can push them on and then flick that clip off, and it just makes life so much easier. Back to this manifold, if I start from the throttle end and I work my way along, you see them flaps in there, I think they're called swirl flaps. Anyway, we go right to the very last one. Let's see how much plays in it, because these wear out really badly. The bushes wear, there's a rod that goes all the way through these flaps, and the bushes on the ends where they sit, they wear out, and then you get all this movement, and that one's quite bad. Generally speaking, you can hear these flaps rattling as the engine's idling. They're flapping around like that. And if they were to break up and get induced into the engine, well, it's probably goodbye engine. So this one definitely needs changing. You can take the flaps out and do away with them altogether, but you'll probably get higher fuel consumption. But yeah, this one's not good. But I'm going to show you something else here on this end flap. So I'll just spin this manifold round so we can see it better. Because the subject today is air leaks, this little cap here that goes on the end of that rod that runs through all these flaps, there's a little cap just here, and what happens is, I've had this about 3 times now, this cap, it's glued in, but it kind of it loses its gluing and it breaks out and it falls off, and then you get a massive air leak going in this way. And this has happened numerous times now, and you have to replace the manifold, or you have to plug this with something. And luckily I've got plenty of spare manifolds, so it's not a problem here. I did find one of these, because this sits right by the power steering reservoir. I found one of these. I had to take the manifold right off, and then this little cap had dropped down, and it was still sitting on the engine, so I was able to glue it back into place and then put it all back together. But yeah, when the engine's running, don't always assume that it is that breather hose, because this is also quite probable of what your problem could be. Anyway, I'm not going to show how this all goes back together, because it's just the reverse of taking it apart. But do use some silicone spray on your hose when you're putting it back on, because being a new hose, they are, believe me, they're a little bit tight, and you've got to kind of wriggle them on, put a bit of force to get them on, and in the car, once again, it's a bit tricky, but that's on. So now all you've got to do is flick that little spring clip off. I'm not going to do this because I need that hose. I'm not going to use it on this manifold. This is just a spare one. But once that clips off, that hose will be clamped on securely. I've just pulled this manifold away on the car, And because I've undone all that wiring and moved the radiator fan out of the way, it's given me that extra piece of room to get my hand in there. It's still fairly tight, but at least it's a bit more manageable. But this one, the hose is gone. Just there. I can prod it. Just in there, it's, you see it's bloody split. Get my light in there. Yeah. That's this was sucking in loads of flipping air. So my bloody camera, it won't focus, but yeah, that was sucking in loads of air. Look at that. That is a big slot in there. I'll wait till I get it off and I'll show you. But what I'll do is I'll get in there now. If there's a clip on here, you can get some long nose pliers in and get the clip off and get this hose off. Like I say, it's still tight in there, but at least you can get in there a bit better to remove it. Got it. Yeah. Look at that. It's got a little mouth. It's all squidgy. It's hello. Yeah, it's all been sucked in, like flat in the middle. Oh, there's another hole in it as well. There's two bloody holes in it. Yeah, that was making the revs like stick up to like 2,000 RPM, and they were like if you revved it, it'd be hunting. The idle would be going up and down. Generally speaking, when these suck in a lot of air, the revs stay up really high anyway. Not so bad if it's a manual car, but being an automatic, it's a bit dicey putting it into gear because you kind of jump forward quick. Anyway, I'm going to get the new hose on this and put it back together. See ya! Okay then, we're all back together. Hopefully I've connected everything back up as it should be. I hope I haven't left any wiring connectors off. The wires are back on the radiator fan. I've checked around it twice over, so I'm pretty sure we're okay. So we're going to fire this up, and hopefully the revs won't be sticking up at 2,000 RPM. So let's see. Ignition on. Bang, straight away, just below 1,000. See, we've got the red ice warning there. I think there's a sensor missing at the front. But there again, the lower panel has been pulled off below the radiator, so I should think the sensor's gone. Yeah, that's much better. With that split hose, from startup, that'll be running about 2,000 RPM. Anyway, that's it for today. Hope this helps. Just before I go, I'll just show you what else I've got going on. We have a Mini Cooper. I know it's mainly Mondeos here, but this is one of the sales cars that needs to be done up. There you go. We need a new engine. That, believe it or not, is a Peugeot engine in a Mini. You see, Peugeot engines get into just about everything. I've already got it all apart. There's the gearbox, the AC compressor, the exhaust and everything. And there's the flipping car. Yep, so when the new engine arrives, I shall build it all back together and bang it back in. I'll tell you what, it's not too bad taking the engine out. I think the worst part is taking all the front off. It's not that it's that bad a job, it's the fact that because it's quite an old car, all the screws and nuts and bolts are all mullered, so it's just a lot of messing around. But yeah, it looks worse than actually what it is. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.